Hello, my name is Lauren Baker, and I want to thank you for joining us for this 13 on Your Side special. When it comes to religion, many of us find different ways to express our faith. Some of us join churches because of personal experiences, while others are born into a religion. For Peter Michelsen, he and his family joined the Church of Carson City when he was just a child. And through the years, he says he's experienced many aspects of that church. But as time grew on and he grew up, he says he began to notice differences between his church and other churches around him. Things he says weren't normal. And those experiences led to a life of him discovering himself, understanding what religion looks like in his life, and healing the young boy that was impacted by the church. We sat down with him and listened to his story, a story he wrote into a book that he hopes will inspire others to walk themselves home. Take a listen.
It's a simple country town in Michigan. A lot of cornfields.
Yeah, it is the small town in Michigan. Carson City, for me, it's very nostalgic.
It's my roots, you know, the country.
It's a simple town. A lot of people have grown up here, stayed here, started businesses.
Everybody here is just so incredibly just friendly. They're genuine people, and I really appreciate that.
There's about 1,200 people, at least when I was here and I grew up. Eventually, when we moved out to the country and I got a little older, things just didn't seem right. What was it like growing up here? Growing up, it felt somewhat normal in my younger years, like, up to maybe my early teens, but we lived in town for a while. It seemed normal. Like the park that we're sitting in, we came down here a lot to play in it. We grew up on Elizabeth Street, right by a creek, and my sister and I would go down there a lot, play in the creek. There was a little hill next to it, so in the wintertime we would slide down it. We were always outside. It was a great little spot in town. I knew we were in a religion. The church at Carson City was the name that I knew. My parents joined before I was born and then was there for 19 years. We go out of the King James Bible. The women wear dresses, men have beards, button-down shirts, no TVs, no internet. There was never, let's go out to the movies and hang out. We weren't allowed to. That was considered worldly. We never made choices for ourselves because the leaders made those choices, the decisions, the music, the places we went to, the clothing we wore, the houses we built. I could see the world outside it as we went to the grocery store or out to eat, but there was so much fear instilled in us that, if we left, we would lose our family, our friends, our whole sense of community, everything we grew up with. So you could see the world, but you just didn't really want it because you knew what you would lose. We were always told everybody outside our community is unhappy. So I go to the grocery store with my mom, and the cashier was so friendly and bubbly, and I'm thinking, so she lives a miserable life. She's unhappy, and it just didn't add up to me. I started to question things. Something seemed off.
I was always told, people outside of here, worldly people, they're not truly happy. They're full of dead man's bones. The devil paints a pretty picture. I just knew, no, they're really happy. And I want that. I was babysitting for my neighbor, and I was like, I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna go. And I called my sister Jessica, and I was shaking. I'm like, I'm leaving. I'm gonna leave. And I think she was like, leave, like you're coming home already? I was like, no, I'm leaving. And then she knew.
It was hard to process at first. I was shocked, of course, because we never talked about it. She had never said anything, so it felt to me completely out of the blue.
I found my half-brother, so my mom's son, and he was in Arizona. And I said, I need a place to stay. I want to come out there. And he flew me out. I'd never been to an airport. I didn't know what I was doing. I was wearing my cousin's pants because I didn't have any of my own, but I just felt like the sassiest thing. Like, oh, look at me, I have on these pants and putting on makeup. It just was so freeing. And I felt for the first time that power and that freedom. And if I could bottle that, I'd be rich. That freedom of just, I don't have to live like this anymore. And there's nothing they can do to keep me down. Like, I stood for myself, and women there couldn't do that. It's hard when you leave and you lose everything. Fear is, the greatest motivator, and they will use that.
Yeah. Being kicked out was probably the hardest thing I ever went through. That evening, there was a knock at the door, and I just knew it was over. And 3 leaders came in, sat my family down in the living room. They read some Bible verses and told my parents that my heart was cold. I had proven that I didn't want to be part of this community, and I had to move away. I had to leave my parents' house, and I think I was just frozen inside. At that point, this was a several-day build-up, and I had a lot of fear and also just kind of blank inside. And so I got up and walked to my room, and I'm like, this just happened. I lost everything. So my sister Liz had left several years ago, and she lived in Chicago, and I text her, trying to, with shaky hands, and I said, I just got kicked out. Can I come live with you? She was excited. I was not.
I was excited. I was like, finally, I get to have some family, and I was happy that I could be there for him, because I didn't have anybody when I left. It was amazing to see him and to be able to sit down and talk to him and hear his story and what he had went through. I didn't know everything he had went through, and the pain, I could see it in his eyes.
So I'm in Chicago, this big city. I have no clue how to function. I found a lot of connection through a church that she went to, made some friends there, but even through all that, there was just this fog, this lost feeling, and I missed my family a lot. And through church, I really enjoyed the music, and what was interesting is people out here went to church because they wanted to. Where I grew up, you were forced to. So I thought, well, this is amazing. What if I go back home and show them this? People could be happy there, and I would have my family again. And so I started writing to my mom, and eventually, I think it was about 10 months, I ended up packing up from Chicago and driving back to Carson City. The first service I went to when I was back, I was living with my mom for a bit, and we went to the church together, and on our way home, I was just quiet, and she's like, what's wrong? And I said, that was the most depressing service I've ever been to. Everything was just negative, wrong. And I'm like, what if they taught, love and joy? They spun it in a positive direction. She's like, well, why don't you go talk to the pastor the next day? And so I went over to his house the next day, shared my ideas with him, things I thought, my experience in Chicago and the churches there. And he listened, and then he said, Peter, we have the money and the facilities to call in the whole town for revival. He's like, but that's not what we want. He's like, that's how you become lukewarm, which lukewarm to them was they were losing control. They didn't have control over their members. My heart sank because I started to see what they were more about. It wasn't really about the people. It was about the control and keeping members there. The thing that really pushed me over the edge was my oldest sister, Jess, was getting married. And my sister Liz in Chicago called and said, can I come to your wedding?
Of course I wanted my siblings there. One of the most important days of your life is your wedding.
So Jess said, yeah, I would love to have you there. Let me ask Mom. When she asked my mom said, well, we have to ask the pastor. And so they all had a meeting, and the pastor told her no, they didn't want Liz because she was too worldly. She was here and she left, and they didn't want her around. And Jess was required to call Liz and say, I don't want you at my wedding because of X, Y, and Z. So she had to lie for the sake of the church.
Yeah, it was really hard. I was torn. to me, it was like, as painful as it was, I also wanted to protect them from experiencing that that hurt and abuse all over again. So that's when I was like, no, it's me. I'm saying, don't come to my wedding, because I had to protect them.
I remember feeling devastated. After I had a good cry, I refused to be upset about it, because that is one of the things that they use against you. Like, when you leave, you're going to be cut off from family, so you don't want to leave. And I didn't want them to have that.
My dad and I were on our way to get our tuxes for the wedding and get fitted. And halfway there, I was like, I can't do this. And he's like, you know what this is going to do to your mom? I'm like, I have to go. So he turned the car around, went back home. I called Elizabeth's husband, and he's like, yeah, I'll come get you. So I was like, I need to move to Chicago. Can you come pick me up? And he said, yes. So that was, I think it's like a 4-hour drive from Chicago to here. And so 4 hours at my mom's house, she's crying, she's calling her friends over. They're trying to convince me to stay. And nothing could get me to stay. That time I had realized, I had really saw how controlling, how boxed in, how small that place was, and I didn't want any part of it. In 2019, when my sisters and I did an interview about the cult, exposing them, when I got home, I wanted to write about this place. I wanted to write a book telling all the details, what life was like there, how miserable it was. And I thought my book was going to be all about them. And I went through a breakup. And that breakup was so hard and heavy for me that I stopped. And then that pushed me to go to therapy. Because I didn't know what to do. I wanted to die because it was so painful. And while I was in therapy, I was going through my childhood and healing all the pain that was created by this place. But 18 months later, I was done with therapy, and I just put the book away. I didn't want to relive the past anymore. I had relived it to heal it, and it was really painful. But I wanted it to just be in the past. And this year, January, a friend randomly asked me, are you ever going to finish that book? And I said, no. It's the past. And then in the same day, I thought, I don't know, this maybe there's an ending to it. I'm a lot different. A lot has happened since I started writing that book. So I picked it up. I hired an editor to work with me, and through writing the book, I realized while the cult is talked about a lot in there, because that's where a lot of the pain and trauma and damage came from, the book isn't about them. It's about my journey through their system and my life out here after the cult. I was writing this from an adult's perspective, and thinking of a little child going through this was very hard. And it was me going through all this. I realized I had to grow up to be the adult who could have rescued him from those meetings in front of the leaders, the times that my parents didn't rescue me, times that I needed their love and support, and they weren't there because they trusted the leaders more than their own instinct. And it was bittersweet, and I felt like it closed 40 years of my life. It just felt complete. And then I'm looking and I'm holding this, and I'm like, this is my whole story, everything I went through. And I'm not the only one who's gone through something like that. And so I hope when people read it, maybe they find part of themselves in the pages.
And I hope to be an example to other women or even men wanting to leave, and to reach out to therapy and seek help, because it's there, it's available, but you have to take that first step. And I know it's scary, but you won't regret it.
When I was a member of the community, there were people that had left that said it was a cult. And we all tell ourselves stories if we don't want to face the truth. First of all, asking questions and then walking away from that. It is very much a cult.
I have a tough question for you.
Yeah.
Your mom is still in it.
Yeah.
How do you feel about
It was hard right up until last year. I mean, it's still hard now, but it was really painful. And I found that all these years I was searching for her love in other people and in things. I ended up writing her a letter and mailing it to her, and I thanked her for the love that she showed me. She was the first person who taught me how to love in this world. And then at the end of it, I let her go. And like, you're free to go. It's kind of bittersweet, but I found a lot of healing in that area. And so I know she's here. It's how life is. Coming back to this town, I wasn't sure how I'd feel, and I felt nothing but peace and gratefulness for this place shaped me. I literally walked myself home. I published this book, come back to my hometown, and it's all okay. That boy that grew up here, he doesn't fear any of it anymore. I really did it.